Vermont.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I offer this amendment along with my colleague, Mr. Clay from Missouri and Mr. Becerra from California. This amendment is simple and non-controversial. It exempts federal legislation that establishes minimum labor standards.
Will the gentleman withhold? Committee is not in order. We can proceed much more expeditiously if the committee will come to order. Could the chair please have cooperation of members? With those members wishing to converse, please take their conversations to the cloakroom. The committee will be in order. Gentleman from Vermont.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This amendment is simple and non-controversial. It exempts federal legislation that establishes minimum labor standards, including prohibition of child labor, establishment of a higher minimum wage, and establishment of minimum occupational safety standards. State and local governments are employers just like the private sector, so minimum labor standards are unfunded federal mandates. This bill could have very serious consequences on the health, safety, and fair treatment of American workers.
Will the gentleman withhold? Will the committee please be in order? Gentleman from Vermont.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In the 102nd, 103rd, and in this Congress, I have introduced bills that increase the minimum wage. They provide for a moderate increase from the current $4.25 to $5.50 an hour and index future increases to the annual cost of living. Today, the minimum wage buys only 65% of what it did 10 years ago. At its current level, it is a hunger wage that results in full-time workers earning just $8,840 a year and falling well below the poverty level for a family of four. Any attempt to raise the minimum wage in this and future Congresses would be banned under this unfunded mandate legislation. This amendment protects hard-working Americans who deserve a livable wage. Occupational safety and health standards that protect state and government employees as well as private sector employees are also considered as unfunded mandates that are banned by H.R. 5. This amendment would permit the establishment of minimum occupational safety and health standards that respond to newly discovered occupational hazards. Without this amendment, no minimum standard for indoor air quality relating to tobacco smoke, toxic dust, asbestos, radioactive, and other cancer-causing chemicals could be established for work areas. This amendment protects the safety of working America. Mr. Chairman, more than 50 years ago, at the urging of President Franklin D. Roosevelt, the Congress established a basic minimum working age of 16 nationwide. This was done as a societal commitment that young Americans should be getting a good education in school rather than working in factories or sweatshops. Now, the commercial exploitation of children in America is back with a vengeance in the 1990s, and this legislation would preclude the Congress from doing anything about it. Consider these alarming facts. Reported child labor violations are up more than 150% in the past decade. There are fewer than 40 federal investigators and compliance officers to enforce child labor laws and 50 other fair labor standards nationwide. In the 1980s, the average fine leveled on unscrupulous employers of minors who were killed on the job was all of $740. In short, the scourge of child labor is spreading all across America again. If this amendment is not approved, this legislation would hamstring the Congress from doing anything to extend fundamental protection to young Americans in the workplace at a time when many of them are struggling to strike a good balance between getting a good education and gainful employment. Mr. Chairman, Every civil society on earth has seen fit to extend fundamental rights and to establish minimum labor standards for working people. The United States and more than 160 other nations are legally obligated to adopt and enforce laws promoting respect for internationally recognized worker rights and labor standards. If this amendment is not passed, the United States would signal our wholesale retreat from fundamental worker rights and minimum international labor standards. It would be a serious scar on America's credibility if we do not set minimum federal standards that affirm our commitment to treat American workers with the fundamental dignity and respect that they deserve. There is another aspect of H.R. 5 that I believe is ambiguous. As cost increased, the cost to states and localities to meet the same standards also increase. Thus, if it costs states more money to enforce the same occupational safety standards,
Time of the gentleman has expired.
I would ask for an extension of 1 minute, please.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 additional minute.
Thus, if it costs states more money to enforce the same occupational safety standard, there is arguably a new unfunded mandate that can be banned. I am seriously concerned that current minimum labor standards are in serious jeopardy. I offered this amendment during the committee markup. Many of my colleagues who voted against the adoption of the amendment said that they did not want H.R. 5 to apply to minimum labor standards. They were in agreement. I find it disingenuous that the same colleagues claim to support my amendment yet voted against it. Let us make it clear today that we value the safety and well-being of working Americans. I urge all members to support this amendment. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman.